house.
Wow.
Good to go? All right, we will call this meeting to order. First thing is, let's adopt the agenda. Motion to adopt it.
Let me just ask about the technology committee. We don't have that draft, so is this something we can?
I don't think we can talk about it without Kevin's draft.
Kevin was the one going to give the report, I think.
Right, so I would ask that, I would move to adopt the agenda, but remove the technology committee resolution review.
Okay.
I would ask that we add something under brief discussion, something that came up over the last weekend about security.
Okay.
And I'll just talk very briefly about it.
Can I just ask, is there anything at all that you want to discuss about the technology committee, or do you just want to table it for tonight? And
I'm happy to
revisit
table it.
next time?
Yeah.
Yeah, not knowing the,
I've got two motions and no seconds.
Okay. I'm
I'll
glad
second
that-
his and he can second mine.
Wait a minute, I have to amend my motion, I was first.
Oh.
We should just make one motion to make both changes, and then Jack seconded that.
Okay, so make your motion, Vaughn.
I'll amend my motion to accommodate Jackson's request to remove the technology committee resolution review. And what was the part about the dumpster, Jack?
Not dumpsters, no, this is to talk about security, and that it's under the brief discussion items.
Okay, all right, that was my motion, just with the removing the technology discussion.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's start with quick updates. Steve, athletic recreation fields?
Yep, athletic fields are still on schedule. We had a meeting, construction meeting last week, and during that meeting, we discussed the removal of the muck, and some of the muck's going to be dispersed within the natural turf fields. The rest of it will be taken off-site. But there was, since last week, another item that was identified that needs to be addressed right away, and that is a plug tie in one of the sewer structures, or the drainage structures underground near the pond. It's going to be around $4,000 to get that plug repaired, and it needs to be done. So that's the bad news. The good news is we just had our mitigation review done, and we don't need to pay for federal and state mitigation credits. So we got a $5,000 credit back out of the $6,000 that you paid for that. So Mr. Anderson signed that on Friday, so you should be getting that $5,000 credit back here shortly. But this one does need to have some action here for this plug. And just to give you some frame of reference, if we remember when Celebration Boulevard flooded a few weeks ago, that was because a plug failed and broke off and went down into the piping. So this is where we have to get this replaced and fixed properly.
Where's the plug? What does it plug?
It's in the underground pipes near the pond, and that's my technical expertise on it.
But which way does it go? Does it stop water from coming in or out?
Yes, to keep it from coming back, like a backflow plug.
Oh. I'll make a motion to fund that change.
Second.
Okay, any conversation? I'll add, under conversation, I'll add one thing for the audience, was when in the $4.5 million estimate we had for this project, we had $250,000 for other. So we have thought about contingency, and things are gonna happen. We've seen it happen a few places, some of them good, some of them bad, so I think this is safely within our expectation.
Well, and the good thing with these two transactions that have taken place here, net $1,000, so you made some money.
Work done.
Yep. Any other comment? Call the action. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Anything else on the athletic fields at all, Steve?
No, that's it.
Interlocal agreement?
Interlocal agreement, I reached out to the county last week, and Beth and I replied back that she was checking with staff to get the progress and update on the interlocal agreement. Didn't see it last week, though, and I will follow up with her today after this meeting's over to see if they have a copy of that they can send to us. We're looking at about 15 days now before the end of the month.
Yeah, and I'd like to not lose timing on that one. Website revisions.
Is that Patrick?
You want to come back to it?
Yeah, let's get back.
Okay, county dumpster ordinance. Jack, you were working on that, I believe?
Yes, I met with Steve on this on Friday, and I was given a copy, Steve's given a copy. In red are the markups that we had, mostly relating initially to including the CDD as part of the the ordinance, and also changing the office's responsibility to the Osceola County as far as permitting and that sort of things, and policing. We added some things under rules, like paragraph 7, dumpsters will be removed immediately upon notice of a tropical storm/hurricane watch or warning within 48 hours. We had that problem this last hurricane with not getting a hold of people and not being able to move things. Also, further define what we wanted to see on the dumpsters, like name, address, telephone numbers, and things like that, at least on 2 sides of the device. So that's all pretty much self-explanatory. So I'd ask you to all read over that, and we can give it a final review later.
Is there anything in here you think is controversial, or is more clarification?
I'm going to say that the county's going to take a look at it first and do some lawyerese on it, and then come back to us.
Okay.
So I expect changes.
Does the county have a dumpster ordinance?
No, they
Of any
haven't.
kind?
They have an ordinance in Indian Wells as far as parking and some other things. And it may be dumpsters or or very large vehicle parking. There's 2 specific ordinances related to that in Indian Wells area.
So if I wanted to put a dumpster in St. Cloud, there's no ordinance that you're aware of? that
Well,
would-
St. Cloud is a city.
So they would have their own ordinance there? But so if I were in Poinciana, which is not a city,
There's no ordinance, no,
So we're essentially drafting an ordinance for the county
for celebration.
for celebration, which they could then choose to use as a template elsewhere.
Yeah, and I did get word from Ron Cole a long time ago. He said, we really like this thing, so we'd like to see if we can incorporate some of it. But that was 3 or 4 years ago, and he never went anywhere after that.
The other thing that this ordinance addresses is there's rules in our governing documents about how many cars can be parked per house, and we have no enforcement authority over the county streets, so this gives the county some enforcement authority. Because when we reach out to the sheriff's office to have them enforce it, they say it's not against their rules, it's just against our rules. So we need to have something in here that.
And does the CCDD have any enforcement capability?
Not over the county roads.
No, they
Or
can't.
over dumpsters generally?
No, unless they're under easements.
The only thing we've been able to do is put in the ARC application in their approval letter to have the dumpster removed after a certain amount of days, but there's no enforcement authority behind that.
And how many dumpsters would you say there are in Celebration right now? If you were taking a guess. If you're just walking around and you're looking for dumpsters, how many do you think you'd see?
Maybe 10 to 15?
10 to 15?
It's around 15.
I'll volunteer to leave right now and go count.
This is actually prompted because a couple years back, there's a proliferation of dumpsters. There's one dumpster that would fill up, and we tried to call and have the dumpster emptied, and the dumpster company said, well, the guy has not paid me his bill, so I'm not emptying it. So it stayed there for like 3 months.
Okay.
Well, that and you have the dumpster that seems to show up every year in front of Mirasol that sits on Celebration Avenue, and it was there for quite a long time.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is dumpsters become targets of opportunity for everything, from garbage to leftover
Everything.
yard sale stuff.
And someone had decorated the dumpster on Avenue last year in Christmas. Right.
Yeah.
All right, so
I
then,
remember that one.
Can I say something about the one at Mirasol? That is not Mirasol.
I just said in front of Mirasol. I
Okay,
didn't
it's
say
at
that
the
it
front of
was
Mirasol. It was not Mirasol.
And that's what our problem is. We don't know who it belongs to. And at least if we have some markings on the dumpster, so we know who to call and where there's a permit, so we can tell the county, say, hey, you need to get this thing empty, because there should be a line near the top of the dumpster that says when the dumpster needs to be emptied. And frequently we'll see that overflowing, stuff falling down in the street, and the dumpsters, they should be covered at night so stuff doesn't get blown out of there.
In fact, I think it was over Christmas last year, and our residents were up in arms and said, get rid of this damn thing, and then all of a sudden it got wrapped.
Yeah, despite the ice, well, the wrapping didn't help it.
so let's,
I'm sorry, but the legal geek in me is having like spasms over here. Section 4 and Section 5 talk about vehicles, not dumpsters.
This goes back to our vehicle parking issue.
We're codifying, so what we would be doing is asking the county to codify our local parking restrictions.
That too,
And
yeah.
what's the justification for that? Why do we want the county to enforce that?
We have no enforcement authority, even though it's in our governing documents, we have no enforcement authority over a county road. And again, this document still needs county attorneys. They're not gonna approve an
We
ordinance
want
without
to
having
improve
their legal.
face value.
I think for purposes of understanding this document, it should not be called a dumpster ordinance. It's got far more, I'm gonna wanna, this is the first time I'm seeing it. I'd like to have some time to read it in more detail,
Okay.
but it looks to me like it's more inclusive than that, and I think we ought to identify it as being more inclusive, and then by comment, I suspect there will be some people who wanna talk about this before we send it to the county.
Okay.
So let's talk about a timeline. Do we take comments up until the 29th, discuss it briefly at the board meeting on the 29th, and then we could give the public a period of time to come back with comments? Is that fair?
That would be fine.
If this board actually came back with comments to Steve, who can coordinate with Jack, before the 29th, we could put a draft out there for the board as a discussion type thing, and then give the public some time to come back with comments. Is that fair?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure.
Okay, anything else on dumpster?
Only thing I'd like to see in there is think about a 24-hour, 24/7 emergency contact on it, if it's
Well, that's-
after hours for the business,
Okay.
something like
I
that.
think we said we need to have a name and address.
Yeah, it doesn't,
Okay.
yeah, but it may be working hours that they throw on. I'm just wondering if maybe we need a number on there that we can get a hold of them in the evening if we need to. Just a thought.
I think we need to also, once the county attorneys review it and get back to us with their feedback, we need to send it through your general counsel for them to review it, make sure it aligns with
Okay,
it.
let's get all comments and pull them together. Okay, let's go back to website revisions.
Current status is, we're moving forward with the changes that need to be made for basically grabbing all the content from our existing site and mapping them out for the new site. And what we've noticed is, some of our documents were duplicated in multiple sections. So we just want to make sure that we do a nice transfer of information, purge out some outdated information, things like old flyers, old events, things of that nature, so that we're not bringing over a lot of the nonsense. We have about a 7 to 8 week timeline ahead of us, and as each week passes, they're attacking another part of the website. In the next maybe 2 weeks, I'll sit down with, what was it? I believe it was you, Jackson, and David?
David
and
and Kevin.
And Kevin, yes.
Can
So
we-
David and Kevin.
Can we, I think our board meeting is in the middle of December, roughly the 15th, 17th, something like that. Can we target completion by then? I mean, I'd like it not to drag on into next year.
Correct. It's actually slated for the first week of December to be finalized, but we need to play around with that before we just release it to the residents and visitors. We just want to make sure that it is in the final testing stages and everything has been worked out.
Are there any issues other than just allocation of time? Are there any software issues, technological issues, or anything like that, or it's more content coordination?
It's content, it's pretty much making sure that it is visually appealing, all the aspects of the site are working, and that's it. It's just labor intensive, so we haven't hit any roadblocks as of yet, and I don't really anticipate, but I'm not the expert on that. I let them come to me and say, hey, this is our next issue. How
Who's
do we-
actually working on it?
Who's working on it? Are you talking about staff in this building? JR and myself.
Okay. Do we have,
I think the next steps are, this is a deliverable in the scope of this service, what they're providing us. They'll bring back the version that will be reviewed. I think at that point, it's time to bring Dave and Kevin back in, let them go over the review process with JR and Patrick, and then look at any notes from that, send them back to the company. And then, once we get that next version back, then I think it's something we can bring to you guys, the entire board, to say, this looks like it's ready to go for us.
Yeah.
I did see, the folks working on the website had a drone up, and they were taking aerial photos, and they were doing photos down in Artisan, and I was really impressed with, they showed me some of the photos that they've taken. If those photos are an indication of the quality, this is going to be a major upgrade on the website. I mean, it just looks like Celebration more than what we had before. So,
Right.
you know, I was really impressed, Patrick, with what they were doing.
Yeah, they were out there. They worked sun up to sundown. They visited all the different parts of Celebration, village by village. We mapped out some areas for them to view, and they went out and they took photos. And literally, I was amazed. It's refreshing to see someone come in and literally snap 2 photos, and both of them are spot on, you know, ready to be placed somewhere. So what would help out our staff here, not only for communications, but even for Todd, is to have that just an image of all the different areas, the parks, the pools, and just have it showcased. We have now a catalog of thousands of photos of Celebration.
And they were
At this
taking
point.
them from a drone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you were
Yeah.
getting up above.
Yeah.
that I would-
Yeah, there are some areas. There's a really nice drone shot of the right across from the K-8 school, the flag flying up, and it was a downward. It
Okay.
hands down some great.
Good.
Yeah, good stuff.
Again, my comment is, okay, we've got a target of December, early December. I think it'd be nice to put this one to bed this year. So that timeline works. Good. Jackson, condo associations and Comcast services.
I'm going to throw this actually over to Steve, because I think you have the most recent information to start with.
I'm not sure if we've updated since the last meeting with the
Oh,
condo.
okay, all right.
Do you want to do that real quick? And then-
Sure, I forget which meeting. We had another meeting with the condos that, their boards, their members, their directors, and we invited Amy Westwood, who had done the negotiations for the agreement back in 2015, I think. And she came in and listened to the condos and had some discussions. The upshot is that we continue to have, of 11 condominium associations, participation at these meetings of 4, 5, maybe 6 different condo boards, all of whom have different circumstances, are in different paths towards deciding what to do about Comcast and television, and have taken different routes to try and figure this out. Our thinking was that there might be more benefit because there is I think what every condo has experienced so far at some point is that Comcast simply stops communicating with them, or the communication becomes kind of meaningless template. And so we wanted to move past that if we could. So we invited Amy to talk to everyone and to see if there's some advantage in having her represent any or all of the condos in trying to resolve what will happen in 2019. Amy agreed as a courtesy to reach out to Comcast about 2 specific items. One was the statement that they had made to some of the condos that they had to make a decision in the next 2 weeks. The other was to try and get some clarity about what would happen with Smart City as of January 1st, 2019, when it appears that the agreement between those 2 companies would end and that we might be without service. So Amy was going to try and reach out to those on those 2 issues by herself. Then Amy also asked asked us to send out to all the condos a discovery sheet, just talking about how many owners do you have, what are your needs, what do you want to do you want bulk agreements, and lots of information so that she could start to put together some sort of a game plan and a proposal for us to look at. Those discovery sheets have been sent out. I don't know if any have been returned yet. Amy started to pursue her conversations with Comcast, and I think that's where I'll transition to you.
Yeah, so I did get a response back from Amy, forwarded to us the statement from Comcast, and I'll send it to the board today after we're done with this meeting. But they are reiterating that the contract with Smart City will end January 1st. And they're once again saying that there's about 2 weeks for the condo associations to make a decision on whether they want to enter into an agreement with Comcast to bring their fiber into the condo associations. So the answer that she received was what they've been telling the condo associations.
Well,
I think the next step of what you're looking at is it's condo associations going in and negotiating all the technical terms of these types of entering agreements. And they're complicated. They're highly complicated, especially if you don't, if you're not a subject matter expert when it comes to these types of installs. So we're at a point now where does Amy get involved with the condo associations, and what does that look like?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that for our purposes, yeah, go ahead, Rick, why don't you come up? For our purposes, we're at a real, I would say, fairly critical inflection point. From the tenor of those communications, which I've just heard about this morning, it seems to me that they're serious, and on January 1st, there will not be television for people who've been riding the Comcast lines. And we've got to decide what, if anything, we can do, and then make sure that the condominiums are all aware of this. Some condominium associations have indicated that they've made their agreements. I think Artisan Park Club says they have. Georgetown has indicated that they know what they want to do. Rick, you're here from Mirasol, so love to hear from you and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, and really, I'd like to go beyond just a Mirasol discussion, just kind of, based on some of the things I'm hearing. I had a call this morning from Harold Hendry, who is the president at Terraces at East Village. And on the 22nd of September, I actually sent an email to Comcast because Harold had called me and said, we don't know anything about this. We have no clue what's going on. So anyway, I sent a note on the 22nd to Comcast and said, here's a condominium association in Celebration that doesn't have a clue. You haven't notified them, you haven't talked to them, you haven't sent them an agreement. Their residents don't know anything about this. So anyway, long story short, Harold called me this morning and said that he's talked to Comcast, and Comcast has told him that they're not even ready to send him an agreement to even look at. And it's unlikely that he'll get an agreement for at least a couple of weeks, and it's also unlikely that his residents will have service as of January the 1st. So I think that the point here is that this has been so badly handled by Comcast, and I have no idea how many residents in Celebration come January 1 may not have any TV or internet service if they're currently using Comcast. But it could be a whole lot of people that are going to be very upset at what has happened. And this is nothing to do with, I mean, it has some things to do with the agreement that CROA entered into with Comcast, but I think all of it really falls on the shoulders of Comcast. I'm not sure what the CROA board can do, but at the very minimum, I would hope that a letter could be sent from CROA to Comcast saying what has happened here is just totally and completely unacceptable. Otherwise, we're going to have a whole lot of residents that I'm sure are going to show up at meetings saying, what in the hell happened here, and what has CROA tried to do to protect us? And I guess I just leave it at that. Mirasol, we've been trying to negotiate with Comcast for over a year, and we've gotten to a point where their demands are just totally unrealistic. Some of the condominiums associations have been told they have to sign a 10-year agreement with Comcast in order to continue service. We were initially told 5 years, and Comcast then came back and said, no, we were kidding, it's going to be 7 years. They've told us that we cannot enter into any form of a bulk agreement with, say, Smart City at some point in our future if we decided that a bulk internet opportunity was better than each individual resident doing a retail agreement. So that's in their agreement, which has basically put us in a position of probably having to say no. to Comcast. We are working with DirecTV and Smart City, who are collaborating and working together to hopefully allow Mirasol to continue to have video or TV service after January the 1st, but given where we're at with Comcast, it won't be Comcast service. And again, as I've said, here these poor residents are at Terraces in the East Village that don't know anything about this, and Terraces and the president there is trying to get something done, but he's basically being told by Comcast, sorry, you're probably not going to have service come January 1.
The question becomes, should we put an article in the Friday Flash or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have an obligation to inform everybody what we know.
I think the flash, the newsletter, everything, every means you have. But I don't think, actually, I'd prefer to go to Channel 9 or Channel 2 News. Talk to them about it, because that's a consumer issue that it's beyond us. We're not gonna get it, we're not gonna get enough attention to do it.
No, we're not going to get any attention. We've tried the meetings, obviously, it was a complete failure. I mean, because it could affect, we're talking about condos here, but it can also affect homeowners. There's been homeowners trying to get it to work too. I don't know what else, I agree we should communicate what we've been trying to do, but other than an outcry from residents, I don't know what we can do.
Yes, but this is a situation that's gonna occur to every single established condominium that is looking to get Comcast upgraded service. They're all gonna run into the same thing throughout Osceola and Orange County, okay?
Well, wherever Comcast doesn't have their own network or
Exactly.
utilizing an agreement with another company.
I mean, I think we certainly could write a letter if the board agrees to Comcast. I don't think it would make much of a difference, but.
Agreed.
We could go on the record as saying that we are, deeply unhappy with what's happened here and think that this is poor. I would hope that the board would agree that that's probably the least that could be done. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure where we go except to continue to pursue with Amy to see what these different agreements might look like, and then reach back out to the individual condominium associations to see where they want to go. I mean, it's clearly each of your decisions to make.
And very honestly, at the last meeting, I tried to express it, but I don't think, there's not a vast difference between the condominium associations in terms of their desires. I think it was clear that almost all of the condominium associations, if there's going to be an agreement with Comcast, it needs to be a retail agreement. Once it's a retail agreement, then there's just a few,
Yep.
I mean, in my mind, having looked at their agreement, there's just a few other things that have to be addressed individually by condo associations.
Well, and I think if there is a relatively consistent agreement that could be negotiated, then we need to know what the fee is to hire Amy or someone like Amy. It doesn't have to be her. She's got history in the community and history with Comcast, but someone to negotiate. And whether or not that bargaining power, that leverage that comes with representing more than one association is worthwhile. And we don't know that yet. So my guess is what's going to happen is that condos will act in varying degrees of responsiveness to the request for information. As it becomes more clear through Friday Flash and other things that this is a looming reality, we may get more responsiveness, at which point we may know more and be able to come back to the board and say, here are some possible options, some things that we should look at.
Do you think,
I can tell you some things that we do know right now, that we know that out of the 11 condo associations, we have 5, and then it sounds like there's one that was kind of in the dark, so possibly 6 that have some interest in this. We do know that each condo association is going to have their boards sign an agreement with Comcast. It won't be an agreement that the CROA board signs with Comcast for them. And we know that Amy's done her discovery sheet, so if we're looking at the time crunch and this becoming mission critical to get these agreements in to have cable services as of January 1st, it looks like our best bet to get the results we're looking for is for one way or the other, Amy or somebody to represent these condo associations with negotiations with Comcast. I think we're going to just keep having the same results if these condo associations continue to do it on their own.
I think maybe get with Amy And that was a good idea Jack had too. Well, maybe a good idea, maybe not, but the idea of going to the news media, maybe as a last resort, but maybe go to Amy first to make sure that wouldn't be shooting her in the foot, as far as she's concerned, as far as going out and what her strategy would be. I would ask her first to see if that's an option, and if so, when would that be something that the associations would do before everybody goes out on their own? It's just to see if that could be part of her plan.
I think Susan Kearns at the last meeting, she had run some figures, and I think what she came up with was that about a third of the homes in Celebration are condominiums. So we're talking about a substantial number of people that could be impacted here. It's not just a small number. It's a
Well, and as
substantial
Brian
number.
said, there are also some individual homeowners that may find themselves in the same situation where they've been running Comcast over the smart city lines into their homes.
But the CROA agreement requires Comcast to put the fiber to the home of any existing Comcast customer.
Yeah, but-
If it's a new customer comes in, then they would have to sign an agreement with Comcast. to get the line
It's nice
installed.
that they required that, but I know people who were still getting hooked up last week, and I know somebody who thought they were getting hooked up last week, and it turned out that the fiber had not been ran, even though Comcast said it had been ran. So, I mean, I would not call the trust there high. Mike, you had a comment?
Yeah, you're trying to get the attention of Comcast. They are a publicly held company. I think a recap of what's going on and a phone call into their investor relations department. You want to get the attention of a publicly held company, you call their investor relations department, you tell them what's going on, you follow up with a letter that recaps all the information, and you also infer that there could be a social media campaign, there could be contact with local media, but this is an affluent community in Florida that is just not being treated well by this company. We don't understand it. You go to the investor relations department, and believe me, they will go to the right spot of that organization to get you some service people that take care of you. But that's how you get to a public company.
Well, I can only think that we're one of possibly many communities that are facing this upgrade situation and being strong-armed into
Well, I
doing
think
what they
ours is-
want.
Ours is unique in terms of the condos and how they're doing it here, plus the
Well, true.
relationship with Smart City and riding on the lines, and that will terminate.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm also saying, when they take their fiber to the individual condos, they still have to go rewire all the condos. So that's where they're gonna strong-arm their bulk agreement again. And to me, that's just a nationwide issue that's gonna be occurring.
And really, the confusing thing from my perspective is if you make contact at Smart City, and of course Comcast is leasing Smart City cable lines to bring service today, Smart City says they know nothing. Comcast isn't even communicating with them in terms of what's going to happen, which has, of course, made us feel as though a lot of what's going on is strong-arm tactics. But now if Comcast is finally, and to my knowledge, what you have there, Steve, is the first thing that they have even put in writing in terms of this January 1 date.
Yep.
Everything else has been verbal.
Well, could I ask Steve to contact Amy? I think Vaughn's suggestion is a good one. Get her advice, ask about the investor relations contact, see what she has to say, and then get back to the board by email, because I think it is time sensitive. We've got to.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, if we're dealing with a 2-week timeframe, we've hit the point where, we've been talking forever and it's not really working. So doing something, I do think we ought to get something in the Friday Flash. Do you draft that?
And very honestly, I agree, getting something in Friday Flash and not only letting all residents know what's going on, but we have a communication problem in Celebration with condominiums. We have, I think CROA maintains a list of the condominium management companies, but getting information from condominium management companies to individual boards of directors that change annually, for most of us, we change. Board of directors can be changed annually. So I'm confident that now Spring Park, Terraces at East Village is an example of one where the board didn't know what was going on because CROA didn't have the correct email address for the new manager that was there. So the new manager had not even told how through this Friday Flash get the condominium boards to identify themselves so that communication can be enhanced. My feeling is only 5 people showed up at the last meeting because the other 6 potentially don't even know what's going on.
And just for the sake of getting it on TV, we, being CCMC and the board, have many condos in here who are afraid to tell us who their manager is and sure won't tell us who's on the board of directors. They want us to know that we don't run them, they run themselves, and if they don't have any TV on January 1, maybe they should talk to us. That sounds a little bit like a tough statement, but I mean,
That's
we
fair.
have tried a lot of outreach. I know you've been trying, because I've read some of your emails, trying to outreach, and there's a lot of them who just won't tell anybody anything.
Steve, can we also put it on cell service?
Yeah, we can. I'll talk to Jackson about what that communication looks like and what makes the most sense. I mean, I think we just need to have the right information that goes out there.
Yeah.
Okay, do the 4 of us agree that we can authorize Steve to talk to Amy?
Yeah, you have a dissenter in the
Yeah.
crowd.
Yeah, just a question. When we moved into the Artisan Park condos in 2005, we were given a choice of Comcast or Dish. There was a Dish tower on the condo itself, and we went with Dish. So isn't my understanding, does that exist in these other condominiums that we're talking about, that they do have an alternative to go with,
Not necessarily. For example, Georgetown and Sienna, there's a proliferation of individual satellite dishes, and we try to get them to go to one separate dish for each building, and it's been very difficult to do.
I think the best way to understand this is Comcast came in here and they did a fiber overlay throughout the community, utilizing the easements that they had the ability to get the agreements with, and that was through the development district. So the development district has all these easements for utilities. So they go through and they put all their lines in, but they cannot enter into a condo association unless they get an agreement from that condo association, because there are no easements in there. They own the entire property. So Comcast now has to work with each one of those 11 to come up with a separate agreement, an entry agreement, just to put their fiber lines in. So if you currently have a choice of Comcast or satellite within the condo, it's because the Comcast is running off of Smart City's old lines, who Smart City entered into separate agreements with all 11 condo associations to bring those fiber lines in a few years back. I think they were a lot less restrictive on their agreements.
Yeah, and in terms of your point, if you have Dish Network there now, and Comcast comes in, someone from your association has got to look very, very carefully at the agreement that Comcast gives your association to sign, whether it will continue to allow Dish Network to be there. And it may allow Dish Network to continue to be there, but it may restrict, they may have advertising restrictions, et cetera. So somebody that's very knowledgeable, a consultant, an attorney who's familiar, and not just any attorney, it really needs to be an attorney who's familiar with video agreements, because they're very, very different.
but if you're in a condo that does have an agreement with Dish, you could transfer to that and you would service.
It's not that simple. I think the bottom line is that it would be nice if it were. I mean, it really would be nice if you could just do that. The problem is we've dug in, and Rick spent, I would say, the better part of a year and a half trying to figure this out at Marisol, but as I've gotten involved over the last 6 months, this is wildly complicated and wildly idiosyncratic to every single unit. So the Artisan Park Club condos have sent us a 1-sentence response that said, "We're fine, leave us alone." But we don't know what that means. We really don't know. And so we're kind of like, okay, does that mean that you got the Dish Network? Does it mean you have Comcast? Does it mean that you are, beaming signals to the moon? We don't really know what you're doing. And that's part of the governance structure that we find ourselves with that you were talking about, Brian.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. And it would be nice if we had simple, straightforward solutions like that.
Well, and it sounds like what is coming forward the most right now would be hire a subject matter expert
Yeah.
per condo association to negotiate that agreement with them. Because their Comcast right now is looking at how many sales they think they can make per condo association to determine what that level of that contract's gonna look like.
Yeah.
So let's agree. Next steps are, Steve can approach Amy. I mean, the investor relations idea is a great idea. we almost need her pushing hard, pushing forward.
I'm gonna ask her too what the proposal looks like to represent each condo association and what that cost looks like.
And I go one step further. I think, given that, that CROA negotiated the original contract with Comcast on behalf of single-family homes and left the condominiums out of the original agreement, and I understand there's some differences, but it's not that much different, you know, whether Comcast serves condominiums or not. But I would think that CROA, on behalf of the condominiums, should take a leadership role with Amy. We know that we're a fractured community in terms of the condominiums right now, and in order to at least put some cohesiveness around that, I would think that at least initially, for some initial work, it would be a good idea that it be done by CROA. Now, I know that if there's an individual agreement that I have to negotiate with Comcast, I would have to do that through an Amy or an attorney or someone. But I think this overall idea of making sure that condominiums continue to have service as of January 1, I think is as much a CROA responsibility as it is individual condominiums. Given the third.
And how does CROA do that when some of them won't respond to us at all? I mean, you just heard Jackson's comment about.
And that's fine. If a condominium association doesn't want CROA's assistance or help in any way, then fine. I don't think there's any necessity to worry about them. But I think the vast majorities of the condominiums in Celebration would greatly appreciate the leadership that CROA could provide.
Well, I would say that, I think we're trying.
I know, I get it.
We've held 3 meetings, we brought Amy back in. I think that when Amy gives us a proposal, then we'll have something to take to the board to say, here's where we are. I think within the structure of what we know right now, we are doing about all that we can. The next steps that you've suggested are good ones. We take those and we move to the next stage. And I think it's a perfectly valid point to make and a reasonable request. But like all things, it's going to have to be applied in reality, and we're going to have to see what the expenses are and what the upside is, and then make a decision. I can only say that I'm confident that this board will think about that very carefully and openly and try and reach an equitable resolution, unless somebody here strongly disagrees. But
Well, no, but I struggle. I mean, I haven't been part of this process, but I remember going to the meeting where they brought in the bigwig up there, and everything he told us at that meeting was an untruth at the end of the day. So, I mean.
Yeah, you're talking about the meeting on August the 5th?
Yeah, that goes on, yeah.
Okay, he made promises to the board members that were here, and then 2 weeks later, I got an email from Comcast saying, no, that's not going to happen.
Well,
I do.
Jackson, I think along the lines of your statement about reality and how you implement this, Amy made a telling statement at the meeting when she said, when I represent an association, I represent the best interest of that particular association. So the best interest of Mirasol might not be the same best interest of Georgetown or any of the other condo associations. That's just another.
we just have to find out.
Right.
I'd like breaking problems into smaller component pieces and working through them step by step. The question you're raising is a horizon question. It's coming up. We're going to have to deal with it. But we couldn't answer that question even if we wanted to today. So I appreciate you telling us and getting that on our radar. I think the steps that we're talking about today are the next action item steps with a great deal of urgency behind them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And you can take the lead on drafting an article. Steve, what's the time frame for an article to get in?
For the November paper, I think it's probably today, or within the next.
Well, what about
day.
Friday Flash, website?
Friday Flash is not a problem. We can get that done throughout the week. It's just gotta be ready by Friday.
Okay. All right. Because I don't know what else we can do. It seems we've crossed a lot of bridges.
I'm just talking Jackson, possibly going to the SEC or the Public Utilities Commission. I mean, we are just a small little ant at the bottom of this pile, trying to bite on something that.
Yep.
And
you raise a good point. CROA is very small, representing all of Celebration. Think about the individual, how minute the individual condominiums are trying to deal with that, Jack. I mean, it just-
Well, I'm just trying to, I think the problem is far bigger than just Celebration in the future, because Comcast is the monster that we're dealing with. And maybe we need to have somebody that governs that monster, like the FCC or the Public Utilities Commission, something like that, to be aware of what's going on, because they're gonna be hearing it from other people as well. Maybe if we hit them now, rather than have somebody piecemeal down the road, hit them one shot at a time. We just need more horsepower. We don't have it.
Okay. Anything else on quick updates?
You're funny.
I appreciate the irony.
I was doing so well, Vaughn, thought I'd get done in an hour. Okay, upcoming projects. Really, I think from an upcoming project perspective, we've got 3 of them. What I see is on October 29th, I mean, the budget has went out to the community at that budget meeting. We talked about the Parks and Rec master plan being a major item. Steve stepped out of the room, but Steve and I are going to meet a couple of facilitators this week. We have a workshop on November 5th of this upcoming month, and I'd really like to get the Parks and Rec master plan stuff going fast. What I need to get up to speed on, and I've started talking with Steve just a little, is how, what we're really talking to the facilitators about is to get ideas about how we organize and structure it. I need to get up to speed better myself on how it was ran in the past. At the end of the day, I think we're looking with that to achieve a number of things. Priorities, where should we spend money first? I think we need to talk about a community center and where it stands there. There's talk about, we got the golf park project, property, we've got this building, which you could always expand. Stetson is always on the market. You can talk about different things like that, but how do those projects actually fit within the scope of what the community prioritizes? I think in our perfect world, we've talked about getting the Parks and Rec master plan done by the time the new board starts in early March, which I would hope could happen. Board comments or thoughts on that particular subject?
In the past, I almost feel like we should take a recess till Steve gets back, but in the past, when we've done the last master plan, when was that one done? It was 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Master plan?
Yeah, the
2015, the
last
Parks and Rec?
2015 is when it was published.
2015.
2015.
I
Was
think it
that
was 2015.
from the ground up?
It was based upon 2010 data
Right,
I had heard.
right.
So it wasn't ground up, it was a revision to an existing plan.
Right.
Are we thinking that this would be a ground-up master plan, created from the ground up, or a revision to the existing master plan?
Well, if you look at the 2015, which is the revised 2010, there's some good ideas in there.
Right.
And if you look under the funding section for the Parks and Rec plan for 2015, under implementation, there's some good ideas in there. And so there's also a section in there that says that times change, and what may have been looked at back then and thought maybe a good idea is now trumped, sorry to use the word, is now trumped by, maybe I'm not sorry, I don't know. It doesn't matter, whichever way you want to go with this. I'm trying to think of a different word already.
Hillary.
It may be that we've got some ideas now that may change that plan, either eliminate it or modify it. So you got to look at the 2015 modification. I think is a good idea, and maybe we don't need a ground up. Maybe we can just do the
So,
modification.
Steve, just to bring you back in, I'm asking, the 2015 plan was a revision of the 2010 plan. It was not a clean sheet of paper plan. Is that a fair statement
Yeah,
to
it was
make?
actually, coming from Parks and Recreation background, certified Parks and Recreation professional, I took the 2010 survey data, and I took the 2013 stakeholder meetings with Jeffrey Mallon, and then looked at level of service, where are our parks located. It's a half a mile per house to get to a neighborhood park, a mile to get to a community park, and just looked at that from the forecasting of the financials, and then some basic estimates of what the projects would cost. and built our own master plan that way. It's really the methodology that planners use to build master plans without having the statistically valid data to support it.
Right, and I've heard you say that before. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, there, as Vaughn said, there are some good ideas in that 2015 master plan. There was also a sense of prioritization in that 2015 master plan. I think there's going to be a lot of anxiety if we say, we're ignoring that entirely, we're just going to start all over again, and everybody's got to fight for a seat at the table in the new master plan.
I had never heard anyone say that we were gonna start all over.
Yeah,
So I don't think that was ever the intention.
I don't think we need to start over, but I think we have had some recent things in the last few years. The purchase of the golf course land, obviously the development of the pickleball issue, and several other things that are now influencing what we've done. Certainly the cost of the dog park is one of the issues as well, and the cost of our athletic fields. So an update of prices would be part of the priorities, and certainly an update on what we think as far as funding coming in here. I think we could probably have a survey of, not necessarily a survey, but a stakeholder type meeting to identify where they think we need to have stuff done. But I think we ought to be able to get this done in less than 2 months.
Well, Brian and I are meeting with 2 of the planners tomorrow, and I'm trying to get the other 2 planners for later on this week. But what I'd like to do is show them our existing facilities master plan, tell them what we did to get there, tell them that we're working off of data from 2010. We're going to be 9 years past that. It's time to update it. It's time to get a refresher on where we are and say, here's your scope. Make it work for our new master plan.
I agree, and there's certain things that probably have percolated down to the bottom there that don't have the priorities that we thought they had at one time.
Go ahead.
Okay, Irene Barr, 1138 Mosaic Drive. First conversation that Steve and I ever had to do with the master plan. But one of the things that this board has talked about is continuity. And that things that happened in the past shouldn't just be thrown out. And I did, at the time that I first got very involved, which was about the dog park, which was about 2015, 2014, when the master plan was first presented to the community and being discussed. I read the 2010 survey, which was outstanding, in great detail, including all 15 or 85 comments. Watched most of the big day-long stakeholders meetings when they did the little dot things. And I did also attend the task force. Jack and I were both there. There was, and I waited a lot of time to say this, it was a little bit geared toward the original bulk of documentation was excellent. My personal feeling, just my personal feeling, was then some board members and some other members of the community went in a back room and gave us the civic corridor. They gave us basically 3 playing fields and a field house, not a dog park. And that's when I got involved, when one of the board members said, I'm not ready to give a dog park I'm not ready to put a dog park on the civic corridor. And dog park was #1 asked for item. So that's when I got involved. And did I think the task force was objective? No, because they were very interested. Every single member going in was ready to approve 3 fields, 3 grass fields on the civic corridor. Okay, that was done. But there was also, it was a good task force, and there was a lot of people who were interested in attending, and there really was a serious effort to decide, at least for the next year or 2 after the civic corridor. So you'd have, the dog park was already being planned, then there was the 3 playing fields, then there was going to be for the pools, the splash pads, yes, thank you, which would replace the tot pools. This is a very important, it's not even particularly popular, but for safety's sake, it's much safer to have splash pads than toddler pools, because parents really can't, they tend to not keep their eyes on the kids when they're in little pools. it's much safer for children when the water is just coming up and they're not in water. And the other thing was the need for another playground. I brought my map with me. It's been presented before. But if you look at the map of Celebration, you see North Village, Main Village, closest one is East Village, and then we have the Tot Lot, and then Aquila Loop, Artisan Park. All of the other part of East Village has nothing. And playgrounds are basically the social hub and life of little kids.
I want to stop you because I think the history is important, particularly for people like me that are locked into this. But I think that the time for that discussion is ahead of us still.
Okay.
And I don't want to get too much into the weeds. What I'm hoping to focus on today is the broad parameters. If this is an upcoming project, what's the scope of what we're trying to do? How deeply are we going to create this from old data, from new data? I understand you're meeting with a couple of consultants. Are these the people that worked with us before? Are they different people?
No, these are 4 different planning groups throughout Central Florida that do work with municipalities, and one actually just did Hunters Creek Recreation Master Plan, Facility Master Plan.
And in that process that you've described, Eileen, of task force and community meetings and putting things together, that would be what we're anticipating again. Is that correct?
You have to understand, when we did it in 15, you had a lot of data, but there was no document, no plan to drive the decisions to start spending the money. So we were just kind of spinning our wheels. So we worked on a process, a methodology to put together a plan that was ultimately had to be approved by the board for us to prioritize how we're going to start spending those dollars. Now, you've depleted your dollars with this building of the athletic field complex, and you have, when we did it in 15, some of the criticism was your survey data from 5 years ago. It was from 2010. Now that you're back to, running low on the capital funds, and you're going to start building those back up at about $1 million a year, it's time to relook at that data again. I think that the existing plan has to be part of the process, and they can take that and make that work with these surveys and any stakeholder meetings that they're going to do. But it's time to refresh it and take a new look at it.
So here's how I'm thinking about it, Jackson. I think to throw out the current plan would be suicide. So let's just be honest. It's there. A lot of people have read it. So I think that would be stupid. The reason, in my mind, that we're talking to facilitators is, A, they do this day in, day out, and they can tell us what is an intelligent way to approach it. We have the workshop on November 5th, and this is one of the primary topics there, which we would actually lay out a couple of ideas about how we could approach this. I don't know if a facilitator is going to tell us this, we could do this in 2 months or 6 months. We haven't had a meeting. But in a perfect world, I think we would get it done by the middle to end of February, because if we bring in a new board and start the new process again, it'll be next September before we're finishing a master plan. We all know how long it takes to get a board up to speed. So that was the thought process there.
Well, I think if you were to go the same route with the task force, it was a good route in 15 because you were taking existing data and trying to get a group of folks to massage it into a plan that the board could then approve to take action. If you do that again now, you're probably going to hear a lot more criticism of, was there a backroom deal made? Was it just a couple of the task force members that pushed this? By hiring a third party, they'll go out and they'll do the survey, they'll do the stakeholder, they'll do everything. They'll compile it back and they'll say, based on what we're hearing from your community, these are the needs and these are how they should be prioritized.
If I could just say one last word before I leave. I do think, however, that the data from 2010 was excellent. I've seen smaller surveys and more comments over the year. I've never seen anything that really contradicted what people asked for. I think I understand Steve's point, completely, that this is a neutral group that's not, and I have no problems with bringing in an outside consultant, because this way you do get a neutral group not representing one particular group, and I think that's great. I just want to make the point that the splash pads and the new playground were approved by a task force, and they were approved by the board, and that's my only point.
Yeah, and I think really the point I was just trying to make to clarify that is that there were certain decisions made. We have agreed to be bound by the decisions of the prior board when it came to things like the athletic fields. And I think as we go through this process, we want to continue to ask ourselves what the balancing is between what was previously approved and where we think we are today. And does the data show us something different?
Right. Well, and you always have the option of final approval on spending your capital dollars. That always sits with the board. What you have right now is a plan, and that plan is based off of survey data from 9 years now when you get to 2019. So that's the question I think that you're faced with today is, do we refresh knowing that this document that we have is important and it needs to be considered as they're building the new master plan? Or do we just continue working down the plan as it is right now?
And the availability of the county money is going to play into this.
Well,
as far as the
when you
funding
have
goes.
new items that are being asked for, I mean, pickleball doesn't show up, I think, very small minority on the old survey.
I mean,
It was in the 2015.
pickleball is new, but, I mean, let's talk about something like a community center.
Right,
I mean,
community center.
everybody on this board gets their ear bent constantly. I have community people who think it ought to be basketball courts. I have people who think we ought to be able to give world-class theater shows. You know, the difference in what you're building and how you're building it is huge. And so.
Are we doing this plan without any consideration for Island Village? Is this just going to be for this area?
Yeah, I think you have to take into consideration the resources that you currently own. Island Village will come on board and say, here's the resources that we have, here's what we think we can put in, and we can massage that with them. But you're taking into consideration the assets that you currently
That we have right now, okay. All right, next.
It will be controversial, whatever we do.
Well, even more reason why.
Really?
Needs of the community coming to the community. And municipalities do parks facility master plans all the time, so
Yep.
there's always interest groups that are
All
gonna
right.
wanna be louder to get what they want.
So to summarize, we are starting down the process. Fair enough?
Yep.
Strategic planning. Steve, we had the December 3rd meeting, and then let's just roll from there a little.
Yes. So what we're looking at for December 3rd is bringing in the Vice President of Communications for CCMC to talk with the board about the strategic focus plan that we laid out, the 4-step process, which included the possible, depending on the board approval of the sustainability study, and then a community-wide survey, which will utilize a CCMC database that will allow us to benchmark against other communities, like-sized communities. And then talk about a long-term strategic planning process and not just a one-year business plan on what you're gonna do within that year. And then look at how that works within the budget cycle and doing a possible 2-year rolling budget.
Right. Plus, I think the other thing that ought to be rolled in there is, I think it becomes very easy to sit on a board and deal with Comcast. Using that as an example, it's the one that's a crisis today. We need to also, I think, some point as a board, start thinking about things that could be, and Jackson talks about things that he calls it issues that could keep Steve awake at night, but we ought to be thinking about what are those issues that could be out there 3 years, 5 years, 7 years from now as we think about us as a developing community and how it might impact us. Because there's a lot of them out here.
Yeah, absolutely. With respect to the sustainability study, just the current status is that we are kind of in a holding pattern right now. We've approved some money for that, but not clear exactly what we're going to do. At our last meeting, Vaughn asked about looking for additional bids for providers. Susan gave me a couple of names. I want to just get a little bit of clarification. Could I take a minute to ask about that? Essentially, what we've got are 2 categories of consultants. We have people that are community managers who retire or leave a community, an active community, and they become a consultant. And in their consulting role, they go to other communities and they evaluate how that community manager is doing. Sometimes I get the feeling that that's to generate new business for themselves. Sometimes it's a pure audit function. Those are the names that Susan has given me based on her contacts out of CAI. And that's one category. The other category is a more academic study in which we try not to find a community manager per se, but we ask for a governance evaluation and a sustainability study. That's what David Mitchell and UCF present. The question I really want to ask here is, I can go and begin the initial inquiries and even ask for RFQs or RFPs from these other consultants, but the process, the thing that they deliver, is a fundamentally different product than what we've discussed up to this point with UCF. And I think I need more direction, and if the direction is just go get this to us and then we'll talk about it later, I'm good with that. But I want to make sure that we're all clear as a board that we don't have any other options. We've explored options for other academics, and we don't have any. And it's not because we're unhappy with Dr. Mitchell or UCF, but if we're trying to find 3 Dr. Mitchells, I can't do it. I mean, I've looked and I can't do it.
Can we get, like we got from Dr. Mitchell, can we get some type of written proposals from these others to show what they would do for us?
Yes, absolutely, we can do that. I think what's going to happen.
Because I really don't know.
Yeah, when we do that, I think we're going to have an apples and oranges question, and then we can decide what we want to do. But yes, we can certainly get that, if that would resolve the concern there. I just wanted to be clear that this is one of those situations where trying to find 3 of the same thing, I can't do it on one side of the ledger. I can probably do it, if we were just looking for community managers, I imagine you all get the same letters that I get from people saying, hey, I want to be the community manager in Celebration. I'd be glad to audit your community. Really? Thanks. Maybe CCMC does that for other communities. I don't know. But the reality is that it's a different product. And so I'm glad to do that if that's the direction of the board.
Let me start somewhere else just a little. For December 3rd, when will we actually have an agenda and know how that meeting is going to work and everything?
I can get it within the next couple of weeks.
Because it would
I think
seem,
we have a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like, though. I think Nicole wants to come in and really, she wants to show you a example of how the community-wide survey database works and the benchmarking, and then we can talk about how all these pieces fit together, and then lay out a timeline for doing the strategic planning process and the budget work sessions and those types of things.
okay.
I think as far as what Jackson was saying too, my only concern, not my only concern, but one of them was the fact that Dr. Mitchell, we would be kind of like the first time for him doing something like this, and this is a pretty big community to start at, but I'd like to also see the credentials of the other parties that you're going to look at, and to see what their past studies have been, if they've done any in the past, and to see what kind of communities they were and what they provided.
Yeah.
Well,
We could certainly do that. The ones that Susan has given me appear to be highly qualified, I will say. They're people that have done this before, they've been in the industry for a long time, so I have no doubt they can.
And it may be a
give us that
different
data.
product too, that,
Yeah.
they'll provide too, so we gotta make sure that's what we wanna do.
The genesis of my question, though, is we need to then look at whatever that's gonna happen versus the December 3rd that CCMC is gonna offer. Are we being totally duplicative? Are we wasting money? Do they complement each other? If we're gonna have a process here, which is what kind of almost asking about if we can get the agenda for maybe by November 5th, if we had the agenda for the other ones, we could look at it, because we've almost, now that we're starting down the long-term planning, which I think is a good thing to go down, this other one needs to streamline into it somehow. And does it complement it or not? It's a question I don't know the answer to.
What's that strategic focus gonna involve, Steve, exactly, on the 3rd?
Well, that's the 4-step process that I just laid out.
Oh, okay.
That's it. And so.
And how would that tie in with what?
Well, the way that it's written right now, that first step of really looking at a sustainability fits perfectly into the process. And this is one of those questions you have to begin with the end in mind. What are you trying to achieve by doing this? And by having a sustainability study that shows there's some best practices that work in homeowner associations, there's best practices that work in government, that as you act more municipality-like, these are perfect fit for Celebration. It also gives you some credibility as new board members come on board. They're not spending the first 6 to 8 months trying to figure out if everything's terrible or if it's working the way it's supposed to. You'd like to have people come on and pick up where the last board has left off, tweak where they feel they need to, but understand the credibility's there, the ship isn't sinking, we're moving things forward, and there's a long-range plan. In fact, the 2-year budget really kind of solidifies that by saying, here's the plan, here's how we're gonna fund it.
Yeah, I think candidly, part of what I'd like to avoid is a protracted 3-year fight over whether or not CCMC's contract should be renewed. I'm a little nervous with some of these proposals, or some of these companies that Susan has put in front of me, that they have an agenda which is not only to audit what you're doing, but to create an incentive for a new management company. I don't think that's what the board wanted to do with this particular study. I don't think that was why it was put into the agreement with CCMC when it was negotiated last year. And maybe I'm misreading the tea leaves, but I just don't think that's what we wanted to do. So that's part of the reason I've been dragging my heels. I didn't want to be in that duplication of effort and going in the wrong direction. Now, it might make sense to wait till December 3rd, see what comes out of that meeting, and then decide, do we want to go forward? And I can certainly gather information in anticipation of that to present to the board if the decision is we want to go that direction. But I think Steve's point is well taken about what
Well,
we're trying to
and
do.
sustainability is there for no matter what happens. So, if as long as I'm here and my team's here, we're going to provide everything we have to give you the results that you're looking for based on the level of service you want. But if one day we're not here anymore, you have something sustainable that the next group could come and pick up and say, here's how it's moving, here's what we're doing. I think you can ask management companies across the board, if we're doing A, B, C, D, E, and F, how would you provide that service to us?
Why don't we do a little more evaluation on sustainability? Look at those other two companies. Originally, I had looked with you, maybe Vaughn, who's asking a lot of questions, could work with you, because I'm working on the master plan right now, so I've kind of dovetailed over there. And then when we go to December 3rd meeting, we can talk about sustainability with, I forget her name, as part of that overall process.
Well, and part of this comes from when we start identifying the problem that we're trying to fix here. We've heard it a lot from board members, new board members coming on this year. It's a huge learning curve to come on board. And if you're spending a lot of that time trying to overcome this perception that things are running terribly, the learning curve becomes even longer. So if you can come in with some sense of comfort that, yes, things are running the way they're supposed to, yes, there's a plan that makes a lot of sense. There may be some different interests from new board members that say, hey, I'd like to get this added to a strategic plan or this, but it's a framework, it's a model that can continue.
I can make it
to move
easy.
forward.
Here's what I would like to see come out of this, and you can all agree or disagree, and I'll welcome comments from the public here. If we actually had a strategic plan that was longer than the next 2 months, it would be great. We ought to say, for the next 3-4 years, here's our strategic plan. Here's how the master plan fits within this. Here's a rolling 2-year financial plan that could be updated actually very easily each quarter. Here's our working capital reserves and stuff like that, so that literally someone coming on board as a new board member can read these following 42 pages or however many it's going to be. They can know this is how the next 2 or 3 years should lay out, because we could have 7 new board members within a period of 2 years from now. What's make that group effective as opposed to just starting with a blank sheet saying everything must be broke.
I agree. Vaughn, would you be willing if I set up a meeting with Dr. Mitchell to sort of follow up? We need to get together with him. Would you be willing to sit in on that?
Sure, and I think if we get these written proposals from all parties prior to that December 3rd,
Okay.
if we could do that and educate ourselves on what they can provide for us, I think I'd feel better going into that December 3rd strategic focus that we're talking about. At least that's some background on it.
Okay.
And if we can have her agenda by November 5th, let's say, if that's fair. Okay, anything else on this topic? All right, charter revision. Here, I think what we agreed was we're going to wait on the new board members to come on board and make this something that launches in the early March timeframe, because we know it's going to take some time to do it.
I don't think you necessarily have to wait that long. I think what you need to do is, you're not gonna do it yourselves, you need to appoint a task force to do it.
What would the task force structure look like, and how you
Well,
think about it?
last time we did it was 7 members. Okay. They met once a week for a year.
Okay.
Hopefully you won't have to beat that long, because that was a major charter revision that redid everything. I don't think you need to go that long. I don't think it's dependent on waiting for a new board at all.
Did the task force have one CROA member who oversaw it
No.
or something, or how did it work?
No. At the time it was composed as somebody became a member of CROA, which did occur, they basically resigned from the task force. But it was Tom Sonnerberg, Herschel Smith, myself, Pam Shaw, Tom Tuzin, and Charlie Eldridge.
Okay.
And I think you all had made the decision to wait for the new board because this is a 2019 initiative. It was being done every 2 years, or 10 years, and the last one was done in 2009. So I think that was your rationale behind wanting to wait until your new board was appointed in 19. Because it wasn't a goal that was identified this year. It was planned for next year.
You could make it a task force that kicks off in early 2019, Matt.
I would
Let's get
also
the ball
consult
rolling.
with somebody like Charlie, who actually did most of the writing of the document. He was the one that retained all the Word document, because we reordered the document in a certain order with the expectation that TCC would be leaving, so we would push everything into one chapter for them. So they should have at least a little history of what was going on with that document.
Okay.
You talking Charlie?
Eldridge.
And I believe those dollars to engage the general counsel, those remain in the budget.
Yeah, it did. Should we, okay, that's interesting. So form the task force for early part of next year.
What do we do to get that rolling? Do we have a board member or two talk about it a little, or what's the best way to do it?
You can look back at the original task force resolution and go from there.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to see us consider is that each CROA board member be allowed to appoint one member to the task force, so that there is a fairly broad representation. I want to avoid any, Eileen talked about it in the context of the master plan, but I think for the charter revision, it's also important that this not be perceived as backroom dealing, and that it be as open and transparent a process, because ultimately, whatever that task force recommends and that we would put in front of the community has to be voted on. And it's got very little chance of success if it's perceived that it's happening behind closed doors. So I would hope that right from the very beginning stages, as we've done right now, that we would continue to operate that way, that the task force have that representation. And since it doesn't sound like historically there was a CROA member on the task force, I think it's really important that we have the ability to appoint a member and let that task force work.
I will say that there's some consideration, though. It's important that you have somebody with confidence on there, or access to somebody with confidence, and ARC, because they are contained in there. So you may want to have them as
I think there are a lot of people that could be
assistants.
consultants and a lot of advisors, but if you're talking about a 7-member task force,
Yeah.
you're actually asking for a shadow CROA board. And so I'm simply saying, make it a shadow CROA board. Let each board member appoint someone.
Maybe what we should do is dig out a little of the history on the last approach, lay it out in a short document for the board to review, and then we just decided from a timing perspective when we want to start thinking about launching the task force then.
I can pull the whole resolution from 2009, and we can also.
Are there minutes from that group and stuff like that too? Do you know, Jack?
Probably not minutes, because we met every week.
Okay.
And basically it was not so much where we're sitting there trying to we went chapter by chapter and saying, well, we need to move this all the way back, and then we said, how do you feel about voting members, and various other discussions. Came up with the thoughts like initiatives and referendums and quorums and thresholds and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff was done as a committee, trying to figure out how we could best do this, how we deal with replacing people should they resign at an earlier stage. At what point of the resignation do you, as a board, go back and pick one of the candidates, or whether they appoint somebody? There's all kinds of stuff that was thrown in there. And we, like I said, we've tried to position this with a thought that TCC was going to be leaving us at some point in time, sooner than later. So we tried to put everything so we could rip that whole chapter out of the document
Okay.
without a whole lot of problems. I think it's chapter 18.
Okay.
Funny, it's still there.
Dig out what you got then and send it around.
Sorry.
Perfect. Okay, anything else on projects? Those were the three main projects I had. Anything else?
So the upcoming projects bullet here was for Todd to go over what is in our reserve study for the rest
So that
of
was
this
nothing
year.
at all compared to what we were doing.
It's not. You guys went on a little bit different route there, but we can go back.
Todd, why didn't you say something? I didn't realize that at all.
Well, it was important conversations, so we didn't want to interrupt. We wanted you guys to get through it, but, if we don't mind, we'll turn it over to Todd and Suzanne.
I think I blew her time.
Did you do that?
Let me dim the lights here, so I can see
That's what Todd was working.
Or am I running away? All right. Good morning, everyone. Y'all still awake? All right, good. So what we're looking at, Suzanne will be up after me to talk about reserve things for service areas. These are CROA category projects. Going to go through a few slides just showing what we've completed this year, what we expect to complete this last quarter, and then the next quarter into 2019. And then also a slide on requested capital improvement projects.
Well, and I want to point out that the last slide, Mr. Anderson asked Todd to include this slide, so we want you guys to take a look at it and we can have some conversation.
Right, so, as y'all know, we've mentioned it before, things that change project timelines, seasonal impact, what time of the year it is, events, schedules. You can see the facilities are constantly busy, so we have to work around that. Contractor availability, traffic, permitting, and product lead time. So all those come into us being able to get things accomplished in a timely fashion. So here's some things that we got completed this year. As y'all know, we did the plant infill. We did over 48 CROA parks, received new plants of one level or another. North Village Commons, Spring Park, Green Lawn, all had a redesign that went through ARC. He's not even here. There he is. Went through ARC Jackson. So then we also had, let's go to the next one. Founders Park, y'all noticed the big azaleas were gone, so help with traffic flow through there. And then Founders as well, and Long Meadow. Site elements. Site elements to me are things like dumpster enclosure doors that were finished, benches over at Ashby, all throughout Artisan, CROA parks, and as well as pet waste stations that were like in January of this year. And here are completed things: Lakeside Park, pool, Spring Park, all got new pool furniture, and Savannah Square curbs, the new radius, which seems to be working well through there, as well as some new landscaping at Savannah Square. And the playgrounds, which are nice and colorful, North Village and East Village. Those were completed just recently. Heritage Hall and the North Village pool deck got reworked as part of a pipe leak. So, next one. Okay, so here we go. Plan for this month, next month, and December. We're looking at painting the pool building at North Village and the pavilion, as well as painting Spring Park and Heritage. We're in the reserve study for last year, so we're pushing them up and getting them accomplished. Hopefully this year it'll be on your October agenda. So please vote yes. Then the first quarter of next year, we're looking at new drinking fountains, which are in the reserve study for like $16,000 from last year, this year, and next year to replace drinking fountains. On average, they cost about $4,000 to $5,000 a piece. Catch basin repair. That relates to the big dip in the back parking lot here, getting that elevated, and so cars won't drag through it. Those are on, both of those items are on your October agenda as well. All right, so because we've had nice comments about the pool furniture, and we had come to the board earlier this year to get all the pool furniture replaced all at once, we're gonna come back to you again to see if we can get East Village and North Village replaced, which were due last year and this year. So that'll be on your probably January agenda. Next one, Steve. Okay, here's the big project we have going on. Lakeside Park. The pool needs to be refinished, the shell part of it. Is due, it was in the 2018, I believe, reserve study. We're pushing it to 2019. We're gonna try and get it all planned to where we do playground fence, the pool fence, the pool shell, and the equipment awning, and restroom renovations all done in February and March to work around all the planned activities. You have, swim lessons, and you got a swim team that starts, I believe, in March. So we're trying to work around all that. We also have the lakeside sign that we're looking at some concepts to bring to you to improve upon that. So first of the year is a big time. So with these things in mind, you probably won't see a lot of budget items and things from me in December because we're working towards a heavy first part of the year.
So we're having this month in October and then having
Yes.
again in January for these reserve replacement.
It's not because I'm just kicking back for the holidays. Here's another big item that's taken some time. This involves an architect, most likely Danny will get involved with it. What you're seeing here is damage to the amphitheater, this part up in here. That's the top portion. The amphitheater is a big steel structure just covered with T111, which is like the world's cheapest plywood you can get. Didn't have flashing on it, and in my opinion wasn't built well, but hey, neither here nor there now. The goal is to get it rebuilt. So I'm looking at the architect to come up with some materials that will be long lasting, such as PVC, vinyl, what do we call it, material, sin board, and hopefully that'll last a lot longer than what this product did. So that's in the first quarter, as well as Aquila Loop. There is a pavilion there that has wood shake shingles on it. Find a contractor that wants to do wood shake shingles, and you're my friend forever for that. So we're looking at alternatives, materials that look like wood shakes, but are actually a synthetic. Okay, next one. And we pushed out, for this year, there was in the reserve study for truck replacement for our 2013 F-150. Our goal is to keep the equipment looking nice and cut down on maintenance costs, so replacement every 5 to 6 years. So we're looking to replace the F-150 here in the first quarter. And also our last go around with replacing NEVs. We've replaced 7 NEVs over the past couple of years. So we want to replace the last 4-seater that's here because it's almost 20 years old.
Todd, have we ever looked at leasing as opposed to buying in the past
I
boards?
have not. Well, I have not.
Not since I've been here, the last, Colorado is the last.
I didn't know it would be cost effective to lease rather than.
Yeah, I don't know. We can look into it. I don't know. Because they get
Just a thought.
used quite a bit, so I
I
don't
think
know.
the mileage
if they-
restriction may be what is complicated with it. We can certainly look and see what makes the most sense.
Yeah, 'cause they get a lot of miles on them, right?
Yeah.
Park monitors in the evening, but we'll certainly look at it. Next one, Steve. And then the capital improvement request project. So this is a small item that I've been working on all year long since last year to get lights in the dog park. It's trying to make it a cooperative project with the dog park committee folks that have already raised funds for dog park lights that are falling short a bit. The light system has already gone through TCC and received their approval. Received bids for it, and we're about halfway there price-wise, so you may get some comments here in a few minutes from some dog park folks. We're also looking at some shade for the dog park, and I'm currently getting things together to go to TCC to get their approval before we get pricing or anything like that.
So I just want to make sure I reinforce that these two items that are on here are not replacement reserve items. That's a whole separate category. This was a question brought up by Mr. Anderson about the dog park lights. He wanted you all to have a conversation today about this. What we talked about last time was, we have a lot of different people coming to the board asking for capital dollars for future projects. These are capital dollar items. The difference here is that the dog park has raised about half of what they need. Is that correct for
I believe so,
the
yes.
lighting? And the question is, do you wait and put it with the facilities master plan and fund it, and prioritize it and fund it that way? Or do you look at adding it as a project now because they've already started raising some of the dollars for it?
Are we talking about $10 or $10,000?
I think they have the lights covered, which are $7,500. We're looking at about, lowest price I've gotten so far is about $15,000 for installation. Because they have to dig through the dog park and put, contactors in and all kinds of switchgear things, so that's where the cost is. 2 bids so far.
Is this gonna be for both sides of the dog park?
Both sides of the dog park, yes.
So, let me just ask a hypothetical, if I could. The dog park was in the plan, it was built out, but without lighting or shade structures. Anticipated that at some point they would be added, or was it never part of the discussion?
It wasn't really part of the discussion as that project.
Okay.
It was additional amenities. The dog park group
Okay.
would raise those dollars.
Okay, so now the hypothetical. We're building a $4.5 million athletic complex. It doesn't include a running track, it doesn't include more amenities, it doesn't include grandstands. It seems to me hypothetically that we could be faced with this same question on a much bigger scale. I mean, I'm not gonna get terribly worked up about $7,500 for lights. But if we start talking about, hey, you know what, we built this athletic complex and we don't have grandstands and we don't have whatever, and now we need to raise another $1 million or whatever it might be for that, are we creating a precedent in doing this way? Whereas we should be looking back at the project at the time it's going through and saying, what are the 2-year, 4-year, 6-year improvements to that project that we would reasonably expect? In other words, when you were talking about dog parks, I gotta believe at some point somebody said, hey, what about lights or shade? I mean, it seems unlikely that it was never discussed. So, do we have an obligation to start asking those questions about these other capital projects that we're doing so that we're not saddling a board down the road with a very difficult decision about capital improvement projects?
Let me just say one thing. You mentioned grandstands, and that was something we specifically talked about a long time ago. First off, I don't believe that there's an area large enough for us to put grandstands. Secondly, having attended a bunch of lacrosse tournaments this last weekend, you don't want grandstands because everybody shows up with
That's why it's a
tents.
hypothetical, Jack.
I know, but that's a very specific issue.
It might not be the grandstands, it might be the
Yeah,
running track
that's what
or
I'm saying.
the,
It's
you
a
know,
very-
something else, yeah.
It's a very specific.
I'll take a little bit bigger picture view from this then. In my experience working in Parks and Recreation for over 20 years, this is not an uncommon question that municipalities have to deal with.
Right.
The best practice for this is to have a facilities master plan that prioritizes when you're gonna spend your dollars. This isn't gonna be popular. I know there's dog park people here and they may wanna throw something at me, but $10,000 is $10,000 that could go towards lighting pickleball courts. I mean, we have to hear the needs from the community through a third party that's unbiased, that has no skin in the game. They wanna come in, they wanna hear, they wanna gather the data, and they wanna have a methodology, a statistically valid formula of how they put together what your plan should look like.
Yeah, I think the point that I'm trying to get at is that I am uncomfortable procedurally with a one-off process in which everybody simply, who's got the most muscle to work something through because it wasn't initially part of the master plan. And is there a way to start putting these kinds of anticipated expenses or projects into the plan so that we know that, hey, look, does any of the four of us really believe that the ball fields project is finished the way it's gonna be and that there won't be any other capital improvements made to it? Anybody here? I don't. I mean, I just don't. I mean, I don't think it's gonna happen. If we could find things that needed to be done with the dog park or with almost any capital project, it seems to me that is a given. And therefore, we have to have some process to deal with that, whether it's through the recreation plan or the master plan or something else.
And Jackson, I'll tell you, when we were planning the dog park, I think the community was just so happy to have a dog park that they said, we'll worry about lights later on. We're okay with you allocating this amount of money just to build the park.
Yeah,
I
and
think
that's
the
been our
same thing's
structure,
happening
has
right
been to
now.
kick the can down the road. I mean, that's what we've done. That's what governance is often about, is, hey, it's not my problem, it's your problem, next board or next people. I'm simply asking the more uncomfortable question, which is that if we're faced with this one-off, what we're gonna be looking at is how much political muscle does any particular group have to force through a capital improvement project outside of the master plan because they want it. And if we think we're gonna get a lot of pressure from dog parks and artisan park playground or any other, or pickleball, wait till you see the soccer kids show up. I mean, it's gonna be, it's a reality in my view.
Steve, what's it?
And the
Go
decision
ahead.
has to be made of how much do you want to spend per project? I mean, you know about what you're bringing in, you know about what the project's gonna cost. I mean, you could have built an $8 million athletic field complex, but the board made a decision at some point that this is what we can build at this level of service with the dollars that we have now.
All right,
What are
Gary,
the dog park hours?
The sun up to sundown.
So why are we putting lights in?
Well, you would change the hours. if you
Yeah, that's what they
Oh,
were
you
different.
were
You'd stay
talking
up
about
until
exchanging,
10.
oh, making it
That's the
later.
goal, is to extend time. in the
Oh, okay.
evening,
I just-
Especially as the time changes in the fall. It's 5 o'clock, it's dark and the dogs.
Oh, so you leave it
Wow.
open
Okay.
later? Okay.
Gary?
Gary Hudspeth, I think you answered your own question. The method by which you prioritize and add on to existing facilities is the master plan. You do it about every 5 years. And certainly if you look in detail at the current master plan, which was written in 2015, you will see as the years go through, enhancements to current facilities. Because you can't do it all at once. Either you don't have the funding, or maybe it wasn't anticipated, and you want to give other people in other villages a chance to modernize their facilities, so you don't do everything in one village all in 1 year. So there is a process in plan, and it's already done that way. Now, every now and then, something brand new comes up that no one ever thought of, and that's that specific board's decision to do it or not. So I don't see a problem. I don't see anything uncomfortable. I see this as a planned procedure and your job.
Well, I would add to that, though, too, that you have new facilities that are here that weren't here in 2015. And the reality may be that this community just, and I'm just throwing this out there, I don't know if this is the truth or not, but they may come back and say, we don't care about a splash pad as much anymore as we care about lighting our dog park, or we don't care about, whatever this is for the fields as much as we care about building a community center. We'll hear that during the master planning process.
And that's fine, we'll deal with it then.
Yeah.
Dory?
I think we're still talking apples and oranges, in my opinion. First of all, the dog park committee has raised $11,000. We have $11,000 sitting there to be used towards the dog park. We're probably the only group that's raising monies to add the amenities. But this was understood in the beginning. We raised we've already put in a few things already through funds that we have raised. My understanding, and that of the committee at the time, is if we raised the funds for the lighting, which are around $7,000, the installation would be covered, just as the water fountains. We raised the funds for the misters and so on and so forth, misters. And then the installation came after, right? Okay, so the thing is that we right now have $11,000. We don't want to spend it all on the lighting, but if we can spend it on the lighting and the installation could be covered somehow in some way. We have the potential, we're doing a new fundraising endeavor right now in which we have possibly could raise well over $13,000. So we're working it. Okay, so I think that, and that's, we're going to be submitting our letter for approval to be putting out there to the businesses. Before we didn't have the businesses involved, but this time we are. So we have the potential to raise the $13,000, which would get us pretty close if we use that. Again, we don't really want to use everything for one thing, but we would like to, so we would like a little bit of help along the way. But that's the facts of where we
I want
are.
to be really clear, Dory. I am not opposed at all to doing this.
Okay.
I'm asking a way bigger question.
And I understand
It has nothing
that.
to do with the dog park. I love dogs, okay? I love lights. I love shade. Those are all good things.
Are you running for election?
No. But I am deeply concerned that when we start expanding the scope from an $800,000 project to a $4.5 million project, that when the soccer folks show up and the lacrosse folks show up and they say, we've raised money and we want X enhancement to our property, to this facility, that we are going to be faced with this same question repeatedly. And we've got to get some more professional, more systemic, more municipality-like approach to resolving it than what I think we've done in the past. I think this is a great idea. It's just, we're leaving ourselves, I think, down the road to a bigger problem that we're going to have to address in some way.
Well, would have everything has to still be approved. I mean, we can't just say, well, we want this, that, or the other, and it doesn't go through a process. So the ultimately would be the board's decision to say yay or nay. But, this was before the master plan, all came about. We're talking a year and a half ago, this has been going on. And that's what we were sort of told then. And now it's sort of morphing into, well, now you have to wait because we're doing the master plan thing. But the lighting, just the lighting, I'm not talking about the shade as much, but we do need the shade. The lighting was prior to the discussion that is being taken place now. That's it. That's why I don't understand why the lighting can't happen. If you want to put the shade structure into that, yes, is probably fair. But the lighting was a year and a half ago.
Okay, let's cross the lighting decision when we've got our formal approach, proposal with how much money they have and what we're talking about for extra dollars. I've got Jackson's point down pat, I understand that, and we'll cross that bridge. But I still think we cross that bridge coming out of the master plan update, or we'll be doing circles forever.
Get the master plan done quickly. Don't wait till February.
Yep,
Can I request before we go to services just a 2-minute recess break?
perfect.
Did we turn that off?
Jack, all I find online on that task force, master rec task force is the whereas. I don't see anything other than that document. Oh, okay. But that's not on, that's on here somewhere? Okay.
But I know one was created for us, it was scope.
So its title was Master Charter Review Committee? Charter Review Task Force. Yeah, I don't know.
I think so too. And now if we're talking about using that little dollars, what's that for?
When's our next meeting with Mike?
This, we just have to know what's the mics.
You knew you were.
Different number every time. I heard it was like $3,000. I don't know if and I wouldn't even need to go back for permission. I would just say it's much higher than what I
Hey, I was just gonna ask you if I can have this CROA for take the license to okay. All right. We're on to the golf course then. Right here. Serrano. I know, but that's a car. We're not talking 400,000.
That's where I'm at.
It's all about, who can leverage the most.
Exactly. But if we put together the proposal, like, we can do this is what the cost, this would be the timeline to get it done. Okay, I'll bring that up at our ballpark when you get that idea. Great, thank you.
How much longer do you need?
Well, on this, I can talk fast, and then on the budgets, you just tell me what questions you have. I give you an overall process, and you tell me what.
We just want budgets to be approved at the meeting, and we don't want questions of them.
When we've already had all the meetings with the residents.
Right. So I think that's probably what we need to say. These are here for you to, if you have any comments or questions. We've already met with all the residents. We've gotten all the feedback.
That's what we'll do there. So we'll get through this process.
This'll take
Then you'll do,
5
we'll
minutes.
do the big picture on budgets like that. We've met with blah, 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 blah. Anybody
Yeah.
have any particular questions? We can roll like that.
Yes,
Perfect.
10 minutes, I'll be done. I'll be done. Oh my God.
I'm a married man. I've heard that before.
So I used to get diagnosed with mole headaches. It's a financial. No, this is, I think it's. This is more of the.
All right, let's get ready.
It's so quiet. It's so quiet.
You made me smile.
I'll never grow out of that.
We're gonna get ready to kick off here.
Are we on service?
We're gonna be on service areas. Go ahead and check real quick. I don't think he did.
6A.
Probably so,
No, we have to do this.
steal a cup of coffee.
We're gonna charge you assessment. Trust me, it's in the mail. We're gonna send it via Comcast. We're good. Okay, one last item on the dog park thing. I was corralled afterwards and asked if they can make a proposal, and I said, sure, send an email to the board. Jackson and I are actually over there together. You know, if they've raised 11,000, if they want to spend 15, if they got a proposal, we're more than happy to listen to proposal and deal with that from an email type perspective, just for the sake of clarity. Take it away, Suzanne.
Okay, I'm gonna do like Vanna White, send all my projects to you. Again, it'll be what was completed this last year, and fourth quarter remaining for this year, and then projected projects in the first quarter of next year. So year, what was moved up was a Roseville corner roof replacement, at the owner's request. 44 units, duplexes and triplexes. The project was very successful. At the moment, they're doing a final punch list. We're addressing a little bit of owner issues, and then we'll have a final walk with the engineer and the roofer.
So basically, this roof replacement job is completely different than the one last year?
Yes.
Just-
We're so grateful.
And Suzanne, the contractor, was,
Performance roofing.
there we go.
Very good roofer.
Suzanne, are those column problems with those?
Yes, I met with a contractor on those. Just throw a meeting house screen. We did landscape improvements here. If you know, there's some on campus. There's about 37. There's some on Mulberry Avenue too. So a lot of plant replacements of dying, missing plants, and the walkways too. It's very lovely. We did the same thing at South Village, replacing dying, missing, failing plants, front and back. What I don't have a picture up here too is what we did with their reserve funds. Their request was trim trees. So a lot of the alley trees back there, the oaks were trimmed, and then some in the interiors too. So. Green Lawn Townhomes were painted. That was a great job that was done by Vice Painting. They were very successful with that. The homeowners were happy. You'll see in the next one too that's basically the same colors of Blue Sage. But that was completed along with the railings, Blue Sage as well, buildings and railings, and on this one we also replaced shutters. So for the rest of the year, Savannah Square landscape improvements, you actually already saw that item come through the agenda, but I put it on here because I haven't done it yet. The service area voted to have New Leaf take over their contract instead of City Beautiful. So we sent the 30-day notice out. That'll be at the end of October in about 2 weeks. And then I got Jacob and New Leaf coming on, and as soon as it goes down, and we'll come in and do some plans before November starts decorating. So that'll be exciting. They've been waiting a while to get that done. They also have railing repairs scheduled. It's under $1,000. So, you know, I don't see a lot of repairs out there to be made, but we have some owner requests where the post hits the ground, so you may see that come up. Roseville Corner, the painting here, up to the bottom here. So we got the roof replaced. Next, we're going to finish painting the homes. We replaced wood damage too when we did the roofs. The same company did that. So we'll be finishing the painting. As far as the columns go, we'll probably do, you know, a temporary repair that can solve the problem for the next 2 longer term situation. And then finally, to wrap that project up, go back real quick, Steve, is the landscape. So it was roof, painting, landscape. And so that'll be a lot of missing plants that we have. Some new design where things just aren't working. Those plants have been there a long time. Okay. Blue Sage Townhomes. So the next year, they have experienced, they're due for replacement next year. The residents have experienced some unexpected, with all the storms, some roof leaks. And it has really put their budget tight, their operating cash to the test. And they still have more coming in. So what I have started is trying to get the specifications, to get an RFP out there, to get this on the books first thing in January so that we can get these homeowners new roofs. So that's my number one priority project for next year. And the last one will be Parkview Townhomes. They have.
Will you be looking at performance roofing for them then?
You know, I would like to, because they've done 2 projects successfully for us in Celebration. The problem is that when you start to only pick the same roofer every time, you have a hard time getting competitive bids in. So I'll look to see, you know, what kind of other reputations we have for other successful roofers. But yes, if I had my choice, I would.
But we'll get the 3 bids that are required, and then we'll ask you to consider that as you're selecting the roofer, and hope that cost that performance brings us is reasonable.
We do the research on the companies, but I know what you're saying. After the last one, you kind of get a little hesitant on going with someone you haven't worked with before. So, but we'll definitely get the 3 bids in. For Parkview Townhomes, they've experienced some paint bubbling on the walls. A lot of it's due to these sloping of these walls right here. which meant the railings had to get removed. We're in the process of getting that fixed and putting it back in, but putting this project as one of my first quarter ones too, because there are some paint issues and this, the service area needs the attention. It's 47 units and it was painted over across 2 years, phase 1 and phase 2, so that's how I'll probably handle it this next year.
Those railings have been missing for more than a year.
Yeah, I saw that when I came in. What's unfortunate is that they're so old that you can't, and what happened is they raised the wall to help the sloping of the water so that we could minimize the damage to the walls, that we couldn't get them back on. And so I've had a really hard time finding a vendor and finding solutions on what do we do, and it ends up being that you solder the bottom. You take off the bottom of those railings and then put them back on, and then the nuts and bolts of it aren't really around anymore either. So it's been quite a challenge, and there's tons more railings to do too in Parkview that have the same situation. So I believe this is set to be replaced this week. New Leaf is helping me with it, which, by the way, New Leaf does a lot of things. So they're not just our landscape contractor. They've helped a lot. So this one in particular, this address is getting his replaced this week. Okay, any questions?
I just want to say I appreciate very much the job that you're doing, and the challenges that come with all of these service areas. It seems to me, not knowing what was happening prior to you taking this responsibility, but the professionalism and the consistency of communication and working with the service areas, in communicating to the board and telling us what you're doing, in bringing these problems up and working and showing us what's going on. Personally, I just really appreciate it. I can tell the professionalism that comes from that, and I think it's commendable.
Wonderful.
Things are getting fixed.
Yeah, who knew?
Right. It was a monster. We're bringing him down into a little guy.
I really hate to do this, but something just occurred to me. We have these townhome, I guess you call them townhomes or service areas. Some of them look a lot like condominiums. How did you handle Comcast with them?
The fiber lines are in the easements, utility easements. They run outside of those. So if they need to come into the service area, if the homeowner has Comcast, then we just work through easement agreement to come in there.
So each individual,
Use a common box.
It's not an association.
Yeah, they're single family owned.
okay, so there's no community utility box?
No.
They're individually owned.
Okay.
And individually metered and individually.
Perfect, thank you.
Good question though, right? They look like they're
Yeah, I was
a different kind
thinking, I wonder
of housing.
what,
Yep.
The one thing.
Which does bring up the interesting comment that was all done without any difficulty for essentially multifamily units, but the same consideration wasn't given by Comcast to the.
All animals are equal, some are more equal than others.
But the important thing to know about this is that the utility line still ran outside of those service areas. And if the homeowner wanted to go with Comcast, they could then run it to the individual home.
One other question about service areas, and I know we're going to the budgets here in a minute. Not every service area has a management committee, is that correct?
Only one does.
And were they all invited to create management communities? Can you?
So the way the charter is written, and each service area has a supplemental written as it comes on board. Parkview, for some reason, and I don't know why back then, was set up to have a committee from the very beginning. Since then, I mean, I've been here a year. I don't think we've sent an invite out to anybody, but I know South Village expressed an interest in it, so we conducted a vote, and they just didn't have enough votes to set up a committee.
The governing documents allow for committees within each service area.
They do allow
They just
for it.
have not chosen to utilize them. And except for South Village who did, they tried to, they attempted it, and it just, they didn't get the
Yeah.
quorum that they needed.
But we told them that we feel like maybe it was the time of year, because it was in the summer. So we told them we'd try again next year, when maybe homeowners are more in town. They want to give it another go, so we'll do it.
The one thing I had requested on the replacement type stuff was that we actually have an itemized list so that we go through and approvals next year, we can actually check them off or something. So if we could just have Todd, Susanna work on something like that, then we just have it for
our audit trail type purposes.
Okay, very good.
Anything else on projects, since we've turned that short thing into a long thing? Budgets for service areas. Susanna?
Yes, so just to give you a brief overview of how that is handled every year, Susan and I sit down, we look at the different categories of where the money was spent last year. We review the funds for each service area. We take a look at what's upcoming projects, what the needs are that the community has, and that service area has communicated to us, and what we've seen based on vendors and, age. Then we build the budget. We send out a 2-week notice to the residents with the proposed budget and a letter explaining what the differences are, what increase, what the reserve projects are, because that's based a lot of what your money goes up on based on how much money you need to put in for reserve funding and any other items that affected their assessment. We ended by telling them if their assessment stayed the same or went up. And then we announce a budget meeting 2 weeks later. We have now had a budget meeting, we've had 4, and that covered all the 13 service areas. And we met with the residents. They expressed if they had any questions or concerns about the budgets. As a result of those meetings, we haven't had to make any changes that they requested. And so then these are the final budgets presented to you for the board meeting vote later this month.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you would look at the Savannah Square townhomes as
Yes.
an example, just very quickly in the budget, account 402, reserve fund contribution,
Yes.
is a negative number in the 2018-2019 budget and the year-end projection. Could you explain the negative number and what the implications are?
Because it's being transferred to reserves.
It's that contra of revenue.
Yes, it's just like we do a contra revenue.
So, of the dues of $82,000 in the 2019 budget, approximately $37,000 will be transferred for reserve fund contribution, is that correct?
Right.
Yes.
And this reserve fund represents
Replacement reserves.
replacement reserves based on the studies that were done for each service area.
Yes.
For those projects that she just reviewed.
So it's exactly the same concept that we have.
Same thing that we're doing. So
On a smaller scale.
the replacement reserve studies, were they all done at the same time for each service area, or have they been on a
Yes.
rolling basis?
They're part of the 2016 study that was done for the whole town as a whole.
Yes,
So
and
it's-
will be done again in 2019.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure we have to go through every one of them individually.
I'm
They're
not-
pretty
I'm just
vanilla.
trying
No,
to
no,
get-
your questions are fine. They're good
conceptually,
questions.
I'm just trying to understand.
I guess my comments would be that in the bottom right hand, under 2008 year-end projections, you don't put a net income loss on any of them.
Okay,
I'd like to have that.
okay.
If I look at something like South Village townhomes, the reserve fund contribution on that one, and there's a couple other ones, is actually a positive. I think that's probably a math error. I don't think they're,
South Village Reserve Fund contribution.
townhomes, South Village townhomes. In 2018 year-end projections, see, you got 204 plus 64.
Oh, the year, the yen, yeah.
So in other words, and you've got a few of those.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
parentheses, you're right.
North Village Townhomes has got bad debt as an income item. I don't know if that's true or not
Pardon me,
true.
which one was that?
North Village Townhomes
That's D, let me go back.
has got bad debt as an income item, as opposed to a negative.
Oh, at the end, okay.
So let's go through, do a fix on all those, and then send me, just me, the income page, so that I can do a review before we put them in the final budget package, and then I'll check the math type stuff. Okay, so then you met with the service areas, they're happy and everything, they think they're good.
They didn't ask for any changes.
Okay, so then when I look,
They didn't slash my tires, so.
so let me, I had handed out to the audience, and Steve, if we went just to that one page we did here, I got a big picture question, I'll let it come up here.
Hold on just one second, I guess. You just sent it, didn't you?
I sent you the
That's
email.
not it. Well, I know it is. This is it, right?
Yep. And service areas. Okay, Okay, so when I go to,
Oh,
you
sorry.
have perfect page, stay there.
I just gotta make it bigger, because it's as high as that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Artisan Park is in red, Jackson, because we didn't have their August financials, and we still don't have their August, you know, they're running consistently, it's slower and slower. That's just a, for your information type thing. Okay, so when I look at this page here, I really say, you'll remember when we originally rolled this out, I said this really tells us, okay, is there anything that we should be worried about, not worried about? The question that I come up with is Blue Sage. Blue Sage, and to be perfectly clear here, people can move roofing projects forward in here, they can, you know, fences, all kinds of stuff happens. Blue Sage, though, this year has lost $5,000. Can we see the top here? So.
As far as the end of September, yeah.
Yeah, it's the end of September. You know, they've got a total net worth of a negative $2,000. They got $1,000 in cash. You know, they got $133,000 in reserves, but next year, because I assume they got a roofing project going on, they're gonna be down to about $15,000. So when I looked at the area that I think is thin, Blue Sage
Yes.
is in nervous territory.
Yes.
If you look through other ones, you'll see where some of them are putting, you know, are having assessments of a couple $100,000 a year and putting $100,000 in reserves. And you can see why, because they go up. Some of these are big units that have, when they put on new roofs, it can cost $300,000-$400,000. And in the reserve study, you can actually see where it's planned for 2020 or 2021, and you get the big picture. Blue Sage may be happy with their budget, but Blue Sage is very lean and mean. That's, when I looked through all this stuff yesterday, that was the one that really stuck out to me. Everybody else has got cash, I can see, you know,
Are you
South.
okay with the lower numbers like Golden Aster and Roseville Corner?
What do you mean?
Well, when you look at the required amounts for 12/31/19, those are also fairly low numbers in that final column. I'm not sure I know what your criteria is for calling out Blue Sage as compared to those others.
Well,
They're operating.
If they've got reserve cash right now of $38,000,
Yeah.
and at the end of next year, they'll have a need of 31, they've got more cash than they require.
Okay.
I mean, some of them are, if you take Savannah Square as an example, Savannah Square has $217,000 in cash with a need at the end of next year of $180,000. So some of them, if September cash is greater than at the end of 18 or the greater of 19, that's a pretty good thing. I mean, there
So-
are details happening in here that are moving numbers around.
Okay, so look at Academy Green, which has September cash of $177,000, but has a required amount of $273,000. Isn't that problematic?
But I think if you read Academy Green in here in the budget, they're putting 100,000 in.
And there's a lot of units there, so you divide that amount of money.
I'm willing to believe all that. I'm simply trying to understand the formula. If I'm an Excel spreadsheet, tell me what the formula is that makes you nervous about one of these, but only one.
Okay, let's stay with Academy Green. Academy Green has $177,000 in cash in the replacement reserves. They'll have a need at the end of next year for $273,000.
Yep.
But they are putting $126,000 of new cash in for their notes in 2019. So they'll probably be at $300,000. So Academy Green needs $273, they're gonna have $300,000 if you read their notes.
Could you add that column going forward, the cash infusion?
I could, but I
Jackson,
had an
think
event
what-
last night and I ran out of time.
I think what answers your question, though, the first concern that Brian brought up comes out of operating cash. So the operating cash, the assessments are due for Blue Sage the first of the month. So there might have been higher expenditures in operating cash over the last couple months for Blue Sage that will be replenished when they get their assessment operating cash starting October 1st. So everything to the left of the blue line is operating. Everything to the right of the blue line is resurfacing replacements.
Well, and that's what I was saying earlier, is that they've experienced some roof leaks that weren't budgeted for. And you
Came out of
can't
operating.
really, you take it out of operating, and you can't really, what do? You have to, it's their excess cash. And, you know, their assessments went up this year, and, but, you know, at the meeting, they understood why.
Right.
And,
Well, Susan also, when she looks at determining operating cash for things like unexpected roof repairs. She'll do a forecast through the end of the year, a cash flow assessment through the end of the year, determine what the additional expenses are between now and December, and then what revenues they're going to be bringing in and where they're at, to see if it's a safe expenditure out of operating surplus. The option, if they don't have that, is a special assessment.
Got that. This might just be budgeting for dummies. I mean, I'm trying to get at why some numbers are more problematic than others, and what.
Numbers nearer to zero are more problematic.
He's just saying they don't have a lot of money. If
Yeah.
something happens, they just don't have a
So
lot of
how
money.
many units are in Blue Sage?
12.
That's part of the
Okay.
problem.
Yeah, that is.
If we, the problem I find with the reserve study is if you do a reserve study in 2016, it doesn't get updated till you next time you update it. So, the reserve study says this is what we're gonna spend money for, but at the end of the day, this is the contribution you need. But, the reserve study can say this was gonna cost 30, it may have cost 40, it may have cost 20. That doesn't get updated somewhere, There's one up here where the roof got moved forward an entire year. Jimmy rigged it to move that forward just a little. So this is still just kind of a snapshot at time. When I look at them, the only one to me that is thin is Blue Sage, and Blue Sage is very thin. That's my comment for this.
And I would only add one other,
On the replacement reserve, they're gonna end next year with 15,000. I mean, so let's be clear. They'll have a new roof at the end of next year probably, but then they're gonna be thin.
But the replacement reserve study, when they redo it next year, is gonna say, here's what you now have to start looking at for your future projects, and here's how you need to fund it.
You got a question? Go ahead.
Thank you. There are 3 service areas involved in litigation and attorney's fees. We may need to go to executive session to discuss that.
Okay.
Well, the legal fees, if you're talking about suits that CROA is in against, we have the, and then okay, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, never mind, sorry, I got you.
There were legal costs factored into those.
But those are built into here too.
Yes.
Whether they're adequate or not can be a great question, but they're built into here.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else on, to me, I looked at them, redo those numbers pages for the math errors, but other than that, I was comfortable. Anybody else have
Bring a
anything?
consensus budget item to you for the end of the month with all these service area budgets and to have them approved.
Yes.
Could I just ask a question about your reserve studies? We've gone through this with reserve studies, and it used to be in a reserve study that they put an inflation factor in for future years. The law changed, and now they don't do that. So that can be really problematic. If we get into a higher inflationary period, we've got to really watch. Looking at 3 years out could really short you looking at 3 years out. So you may have to do the reserve studies more often.
I think what Rick's saying is that it used to be a requirement. Now it's not a requirement, but it's still best practice to look at inflation. And I would recommend that you continue to do that. But when you start getting into service areas, if it's only 13 units, if the dollar amount for that replacement reserve contribution is very high, they may say, well, let's take off some inflation. Let's do this, let's do that to try and lower what that annual or that monthly service area payment's gonna look like.
Okay. Anything else on the service area budgets? All right, Jack, under brief discussions for the future, you had wanted to add security?
Yeah, just one thing I want to talk about. Steve, you sent us an email last week about something that took place, and I never saw it hit the news or anywhere else. But I was also talking with somebody on Friday, I believe it was, that mentioned about a house that is a known drug house in North Village, that there was a raid on it. And what I'm concerned with is that we sit here fat, dumb, and happy, and we never hear of any of the security issues here. We used to get a blotter from CDD. I'd like to formally request that we get this blotter from Sheriff Gibson, because we have no idea what's going on in here, okay?
I think when we talked to Jeff New Island about this in the past, he said because their contract's with the CDD, if the CDD just asks for it, then they'll be required to do it. So the best way to get that done is probably as the board liaisons going you know, when you have that CROA a lot of time at CDD meeting, make a formal request.
Well, I know we've done it before, we've done it in the past, we've talked to them many times, and it's never gotten to us.
They haven't taken action on it.
Okay. I mean, it's very disappointing, though, to find out that there's a drug bust and people were arrested, and it's a known drug house. And also the same incident that you mentioned to us last week.
I didn't receive any notification of a drug bust.
I was gonna say, I didn't
did
hear
receive
that.
The incident that you were speaking of last week.
Well,
Okay.
And I think the development district would have to give direction to the sheriff's office to provide that as part of their contract.
Well, then I'd ask the board that we extend that to the CDD.
Okay. Will you and Bond roll forward with that at the next
I don't
meeting?
know why we have to go to them. You can just call the sheriff. I mean, it's public record. There's nothing special about it. You can just call the sheriff's office and ask for a copy of it.
I think it was.
You don't have to go to CDD.
I think it was the deputy that was allocated to Celebration
Well,
was
it used to be
building this.
Andy Lang would get it for us on a weekly basis. And then he retired, and then it's been gone since then. And we've asked Jerry Weiland to get it, but he's never gotten it for us.
Okay. Anything else for this meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? Second. All in favor? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I only ran 15 minutes over.
That's not bad.
You failed miserably.
I feel like we're in the dark here, though.
Thank you, Susan.